It's time for a session on innovation collaboration, and I will leave the floor to you, Professor Carlo Ratti from MIT, the Mayor of Stockholm, Anna König Jerlmyr, and the President of KTH Royal Institute of Technology, Sigbritt Karlsson. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucas. Great to be here. What an exciting morning. So this morning we saw really a lot of collaboration, a lot of innovation, a lot of, a lot of new thinking about the city. And so I wanted to look at one dimension of that. When you look at Boston, when you look at Stockholm, well, there is something similar. Stockholm is often called in Europe the city of unicorns. So, what is the role of universities in that? What is the role of what we've seen this morning in then turning research and turning discoveries in the end into innovation, into startups, into economy?
Is that yeah?
I wanted to ask it to both of you. Yeah.
Yeah, but I can start. But one thing is that we have these great universities in Stockholm. We're so proud of KTH, and when we went to Boston as well to have this collaboration within the city. We have so much challenges in the city. We have great persons within the city and the administrations, but then often it's like you are already doing research on our challenges. So one way is actually to collaborate more and to share experience, and also that for us as a city to know about the research, and then we can commit to different policies and using the city as a test bed, as Boston do, I know, and also the city of Stockholm.
Very good. Sigbritt.
Okay, the role for a university like KTH, we are sometimes called MIT in Europe, in the north of Europe. Anyway,
we'll call KTH of the South.
Yeah, good. Good. But anyway, it's in our DNA to work with collaboration and also work with innovation. It has been our role since close to 200 years when we were started as a part of industrialization of Sweden. So that is really important for our engineers and architects, that the innovation is present. At the same time that the knowledge is really important, that they have the knowledge. And our students leave KTH and find their ways out in the society and in industry, where they will be asked to take part in innovation and of different kinds. So it's really important that we have it present within our courses and things like that.
No, this is great, and I maybe on this, I'd like to elaborate on what Anna was saying about, how the city can become then a living lab. Here we've seen a lot of content, and that is something that can really be tested in the city. It's a bit different. I think what we are living today is similar to a certain extent to what we saw like 20 years ago at the beginning of digital. But at the time, innovation and trying new things was happening just in virtual world. Now it's more like digital and physical, the combination of the two. So the city becomes the lab. How do you do that? What's a good way to turn the city, as you were saying, into a living lab?
To engage with the citizens and also to make them active with co-creation of solutions. And one thing I just loved that, to engage the community or the neighborhood, but also to test with sensors and citizens so they can actually be a part of the collectible data. For example, if we know that we have to electrify transport until 2030. That's a very ambitious goal that we have in the city. But if we can use the innovation that was shown here today to show that, we have data from the citizens or from different vehicles that shows that we have problems with the air quality. So we have to change, and then they will be a part of the solutions, but also bring topics to the agenda. So it's a bottom-up perspective. And then we bring public values. So we say, okay, the goal is actually clean air, 2030. And the way ahead is electrification.
That's probably a little bit of what we are doing today, with all of you here, but also all the people following remotely. It's about, having feedback loops with people. A bit like what nature does. You try something, then you, by having feedback loops that can help enact transformation. Yeah. And but there's something sometimes in universities we are a bit accused of, publishing just in scientific journals and so on. How do we do this better as academics? To really to engage people in the process. Ultimately, it should be people to decide what type of city they want. To look at the research we're discussing today, and see how that can actually be turned into a different city. What do you think, Sigbritt?
I think it's really important that you understand as an academic person that you're part of society and that we go outside the wall, because it's sometimes described that universities are back behind the wall, and ask questions. Even if our scientists are really in the front line of research, there are still questions that needs to be asked. And by participating and asking both the City of Stockholm but also the citizens, we can find new threads that are unexplored. So this engagement with each other will eventually lead to even better universities and contribute to a better living, for example, in the Stockholm area.
Yeah.
So we should somehow kind of. Oh no, go ahead, Dan.
No, but also it's about talent attraction. That's really crucial for us ahead, and we need international talents that please stay in Stockholm. You're from Boston, but also Swedish students to stay, because that's also really important for the future. And then I think one positive thing we have here is the impact-driven research, the impact-driven entrepreneurs, and if we can combine that, we know the engagement for sustainable solutions, but also health and that kind of, so we can use that to attract talents for the future.
Yeah, yeah, and when you look at that, really defining what impact is, in this case about transforming the city, I think what we've seen on the MIT side is quite interesting. Like 10, 20 years ago, people had a goal of just doing a unicorn. Now the goal is more people graduating. I mean, now the goal is more like, how can you impact like a billion people, not $1 billion company, but how can you impact a billion people? And I think, the city could become the great place to experiment with that.
Yeah, and now you're talking about data today, and that's so important for us decision makers, that we can use that the data of the measures we're doing, it's actually giving effect. Yeah. And then impact is something real, not something, greenwash, someone is saying, oh, I have a city have all these goals, but actually, we are going to measure what we do to reach our goals.
This seems to be exciting from the point of view of reaching some of the, again, in terms of impact, some of the very ambitious goals that Stockholm has set. I believe, all C40 cities committed to being net zero carbon by 2050, but actually Stockholm has even more ambitious goal. Is that correct?
Yeah, both climate positive, we believe in the CCS technique, but of course also to be emission free from traffic 2030. The inner city, that's the heavy vehicle and the and the private vehicles.
And big data, Sigbritt could probably, a lot of the things we saw this morning could help us monitor, because today all cities have very ambitious goals, but then unless you can measure it, it's very difficult to get there. Unless you can measure it, share with people, enact behavioral change. If we measure, if we use big data, that can really probably help us better reach that.
Absolutely, I agree, and I will also pick up on the thread with the talents, because if you know that when you come to KTH, for example, there's a possibility to interact with the society, and young people today are really targeting sustainable development. Yep. So this is really a big sustainable development project that we together as organization are starting on the road. So that would lead to probably that the vision you have in the City of Stockholm will be reached.
Yeah, yeah, totally. There's something that bothers me sometimes, however, when you turn that, imagine you got this ambitious goal and you look at cities. Cities often think, and it bothers me not in Stockholm, in general for cities, that usually cities look at best practices. And best practices, you look at the past, you look at what other cities have done, and basically keep replicating that. But however, if you want to do something by 2030, which is tomorrow, or something by 2050, best practices kind of lock us in the past way of thinking. It's like looking at the past to... So how can you actually innovate even more, try new things, and not really look at best practices, but more like we did with COVID? the incredible thing during COVID was we didn't have best practices, so we had to be much more creative. How can we keep that approach in, in making decisions in cities, which is not looking at what somebody else has done and replicating, but really be taking more risks?
It's a mindset. So you have to create a culture where you can try and where you can fail, and that fail is learning. And I think that is so important for a city to have that kind of mindset. So it's just, failing as a way of learning and then trying, because in the end you will create new great ideas. But one thing we can do is to work with the labs. Like we are planning in Kista, for example, to say like, this district should be our innovation. If you want to have a glimpse for the future, come to this area.
Yeah.
And here we will have innovation zones. So here you can innovate, no regulation. Okay, I will not promise too much. We have national regulations, but try to avoid as many of the cities' regulation and say, here is like our test bed where you can actually, or a test district, and then we can scale it. And that's also important, because all the great ideas, the challenge for us is to scale, and is that not let it end here. Let it be the beginning of something.
So you heard the mayor, Kista is going to be the new Christiania, like in Copenhagen, in Stockholm. I'm joking here, but in a place for experimentation, for trying things. And if I understand correctly, clearly, if you want to take more risk, then you also need to limit it, maybe geographically, so have a smaller area where you elaborate, where you experiment, or temporarily. So somehow, take risk, but actually make sure that if something fails, because when you're taking risk, when you do startups, when you try something new, you need to take failure into account. That failure will not affect the whole cities. How would the MIT campus do the same? Sorry, the KTH campus. no, the KTH campus do the same.
We're in a process now where we try to have a vision on what kind of campus, what kind of physical presence will KTH have in the future. And the COVID pandemic has learned that maybe we are not having all the answers now. So this is a huge effort, I think, to form what kind of university we want to be. We have learned, for example, that we reach much longer with the digital solutions, so we can have people in our PhD defense coming from all around the world. And we like to benefit from this and put forward some bold actions for the KTH and our campuses. But at the same time, I think in the City of Stockholm, we need, because I also live close by here, what kind of city do we want to have? At one part in the pandemic, it seems that all people wanted to leave the cities and live in the countryside because it was just as easy. And then I don't know if it will be like that, but the cities need to, and also us campus, do the students want to be at our campus?
Yeah.
What do they want to do at our campus that they can't do from home?
Yeah, and actually, then the KTH campus can really become a way to look at how we will work in the future post the pandemic. We know it's not going to be the same as before. It's going to be kind of a new normal. And actually, one of the things we were discussing before is how in some of the research we're doing both at KTH and at MIT, if you just work digitally, then you lack something very important. It's probably the magic that's happening today as well, the fact that people who don't know each other bump into each other, discuss new ideas. There's kind of serendipity. This doesn't happen yet via Zoom, but this happens in physical space. And what makes me very upbeat about the role that cities and campuses and physical space will keep on having is not going to be just living virtual in our pajama connecting from the kitchen. Is going to be still going and meeting together.
Yeah, and I like what Sigbritt says, because it's like, listen to the citizens. Otherwise, you have this picture of a politician that had a strong will and decide over the people, and if you don't do that, you are, not a strong leader. But after the pandemic, it really shown the importance of listen to the people, listen to the citizens, make them engage, make them contribute, because without a city without people, or it's not very attractive, talent. So
the Latin two words for city had urbs and civitas. Urbs, the physical city, the city made of bricks and stone, but actually civitas, the community. And this was the same word, but one can exist without the other. But now, because we've heard a lot about engaging the people, we heard a lot about risk-taking, I wanted to take a risk, which is not following the script and asking people in the room if you got any ideas, any questions, anything you would like to bring to the debate. You can do it. I will repeat the question, but any thoughts about what you've seen this morning? Or no, think about it. We'll continue the conversation, but just raise your hands, and then if there's any thoughts you would like to add to this conversation, they certainly will enrich this. It's about participation. We're in this together, looking at how what we listened to this morning can actually be turned into innovation in cities.
Yeah, great.
Any thoughts? We can also. I took the risk. Now it's your turn. But meanwhile, we go ahead. So think about this and just raise your hands and we'll bring this. Now, Anna, I want to mention something else about this kind of which is related to what we heard this morning. Is about during the pandemic, there were actually some thinking, and we were part of that. For instance, with an article in the Financial Times about how we can, just by bringing more flexibility in our lives, we can actually have the whole city work better. Usually the problem of the city is not about capacity, it's just that you got peaks. And if we're more flexible, how we live, how we work, that can help. But maybe you could tell more about that and how this is kind of becoming policy in the city.
Yeah, but thank you, Carlo, and you're such an inspiration for that kind of thinking. And when I went to Boston, one of the first things, I ended up in a taxi, and he was very upset about the traffic jams, and he said, "Oh, it's politics," and then he pointed at a bicycle lane, and I was like, "This is exactly the same in Stockholm." It's traffic jams, and it's complaining about it's too much bicycling and so on, but instead of just focusing on this conflict all the time, the pandemic really shown that we should use what we have in a much more smarter way. And it's about looking at demand during peak and then try to steer so that demand doesn't exceed
the capacity.
Supply, the capacity. So one thing we can do, actually, if the more heavy vehicle could be transformed into electrified cars or transport or logistics, they could go late at night or during night. Then they don't have to end up in the morning traffic, for example. We know now that people can work different hours, many of them, not all of them, but many people can work from different, they can start a little bit later in the day. They don't have to end up in crowded places on the tube or in the traffic. They could go different, more flexible hours, especially when it comes to school for the older gymnasium students. We know for research that they could actually start school a little bit later in the day because that's good for them. We haven't, change the school system yet, but that could be something to start school a little bit later, but just to use what you have in a more efficient way. Then we can have better flows in traffic or in public transport, but we can also have more accessible service.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we need to work on.
Which is really taking advantage of the new flexibility we have today in order to avoid the peaks. We had 20th century city, everybody was doing the same thing at the same time. If you had no flexibility, then clearly you got a big traffic jam at 8 a.m. or whenever during rush hour. And then if we can reschedule our lives and our cities, then we could all live better. And how would you see that, Sigbritt, on the KTH campus, on the way professors work and, both from home and from, we heard a number of interesting stories yesterday about, some people who want to, not only KTH, at MIT and all over the world, or people who don't want to go back to campus. How are you planning to deal with that in this kind of rescheduling?
That is really a good question. We are discussing it presently, in fact. But there needs to be a flexibility, of course. But our main focus with respect to teaching and learning is the students. So the students need to have the best learning facilities and learning conditions. And that means that it's not up to a single teacher to decide, I like to be at home all the time and do all digital. So it need to be a dialogue on what is the best thing to learn if we talk about students, and the pedagogical issue, that's what decides if it's a digital solution or if it's a physical presence. And in general, I would say teachers and researchers, they work all around the clock. So maybe the problem is not when they are working, rather how much they are working, because tomorrow there will be a release of a report from one of our unions that talks about a huge amount of work that our teachers at universities put down during the pandemic in order to get the education to work.
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of allow and have a flexibility, but also together decide what is the best way to do this research or this teaching.
Yeah, so it looks like the solution here as well is we'll try different things, and also in the same ways with the city, we need to listen to citizens. The university need to listen to students and the community and see, then what can work best for them. But my risk experiment seems to have generated something. I see a hand, a couple of hands actually, but would you like to go first? If you mention it for the people on the listening, I will repeat it. Yeah. Yeah. That is maybe I repeat it just briefly in a summary, just because I don't know if people listening online heard it, but basically the point is in order to be so brave and to take some of the risk, well, data and the modeling, like what we saw this morning, can actually help to understand where we're going, and it can be a very important tool in order to motivate people. I personally fully agree with the comment. Any comments from your side, Anna and Sigbritt?
If I start, I could say that it's the bold step that we need to take, in fact. If we are waiting for everyone to agree, then we will wait forever, because that's usually, we have 1/3 that might think this is a really good idea, why haven't we already done it? And then we have some people that are a little bit need persuasion, and then we have the unpopped popcorn that someone told me they will never pop.
But then, of course, the cost also to do nothing, status quo. And what's very interesting with this lab is also to be proactive in 10 years. We know the cost for the severe rain. We had the cost in Copenhagen, for example, how much that cost, both for the citizens, but also for the city. We know that we have to adapt, but also mitigate emissions for the future. It will be costly for the planet, we have to do it, but also for cities. So that's something that if we can measure through data before and after, we can measure impact. We can also measure cost benefits. And that should be something that, we work with the climate budget in the city, but we could have that perspective also in that kind of budget. But it's true. And that's, we all have a responsibility to show that, we all have to embrace. So now someone comes with a solution, we shouldn't just say it's impossible, or we tried that, or it's, we
That's-
have to embrace it.
I think we have to embrace it. There are wonderful words to end. I think we're towards the end of our session. Maybe one way to summarize it, we summarize some of the discussions. We started from the lab. Today we saw a lot about the lab, is Senseable Stockholm Lab. But that lab is just part of using Stockholm, and in particular parts of Stockholm, Kista or the KTH campus, as a lab for innovation. And clearly the data, there's a feedback loop. The data we produce at the lab can actually help see how this innovation can become reality, how we can take risk in a way that in a conscious way, and how we can use simulations in order to really see what type of city we are doing tomorrow. All of this, and thanks a lot also for intervening. Thanks for the question for intervening. Really, all of this with citizens, with everybody. So this should really be a conversation. So please join me to thank our wonderful speakers and guests, and to be continued.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Sigbritt, and thank you, Carlo, for your insights and explorations on the City of Stockholm in the future, and also on the Senseable Stockholm Lab.